Good day, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and thanks again for subscribing to our channel. The topic we have before us today is tissues and supporting systems. Tissues and supporting systems. So, what does this topic imply? What do we mean by tissues and supporting system? First and foremost, we need to talk about tissues. So, what are tissues? Tissues are collection of cells with similar structure and function. Tissues are collection of cells. They are collection of cells with similar function, with similar structure and function. So that is what we refer to as tissues. So we are talking broadly about a whole lot of things today. So we'll be starting with what we refer to as tissues. So we have just said now that tissues are a collection of cells that have similar structure and function. So when we have a group of cells that are related in their structure and the function that they carry out, then we group them together as tissues. So we'll be looking at those tissues that are responsible for supporting a particular system, supporting an organism. Tissues that support the body of an organism, be it plant or animal, whatever system that we'll be talking about. So that is what this topic is actually about. So we start by saying that a group of organisms have definite shapes and sizes, and these shapes are as a result of the tissues that are arranged to form the supporting systems. Again, I said that all organisms have definite shapes and sizes, and these shapes are made possible by tissues that are arranged to form the supporting system. So that invariably is telling us that if there are no tissues, we can have no system. So it is made possible, the systems are made possible, systems are possible to have their support, possible to have their shapes and sizes, their shapes and sizes as a result of the tissues that they have, as a result of the tissues that they what that they possess. So that is what this particular topic is about. That is what this topic is talking about. So we will quickly be looking at a whole lot of things now. So in let me be specific. Let me seclude my discussion today to that of animals. If we're talking about animals, there is a particular supporting tissue that we have in animals, and that is skeleton. The skeleton is the supporting tissue that we have in animals. So today we will quickly be looking at what skeleton is. Skeleton. We'll be looking at what we refer to as skeleton. So I need everybody to understand that skeleton can be found in animals. Skeleton can be found in animals. So a skeleton is defined as a rigid framework that gives support, shape, and what protection to the parts of an organism. A skeleton again is said to be an uh, uh, a setup, a framework that gives rigidity, gives support, shape, protection to the part of an organism. So, if we have to talk about what an organism is made up of, that is going to be what the skeleton is. So, every organism has its own skeleton. Skeleton, like I said, is a framework that gives shape, that gives shape, support. Since we are talking about supporting systems or supporting tissues, so it gives shape, support, shape. We can also have protection to the internal structures or to the parts of an organism. to the parts of an organism. So that is what we refer to as skeleton. So I need us to understand here at this junction that we have several types of skeleton depending on the type of organism that we have. We have different types of skeleton depending on the type of organism that we have, and that is going to make us talk about what we refer to as the types of skeleton. Types of skeleton. So what do we refer to, or what are the types of skeleton that we will need to be talking about? The types of skeleton. First and foremost, we'll be talking about, okay, let's just list them. Let's list them first. We have the first one. The first one, that is the exoskeleton. Exoskeleton. And the second one is the endoskeleton. The exoskeleton is found outside the body. Outside the body of an organism. That is where we have the word exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is found outside the body of an organism, while the endoskeleton is found inside the body of an organism. Inside the body of an organism. So that is the first thing we need to understand about this. We have the exoskeleton that is found outside the body of an organism and the endoskeleton that is found inside the body of an organism. So let us quickly look at what the endoskeleton is. Let's try to discuss extensively what the exoskeleton is. The exoskeleton. So like I just said, the exoskeleton is found outside the body of an organism, and it is made up of corticals. This particular skeleton is found outside the body of an organism. It is found on the outer covering of the body of an organism, and it is made up of thick corticals in the arthropods. We see this type of skeleton majorly in the arthropods or in snails, crabs, spiders, insects, etc. So it is made up of, the exoskeleton is rich in, it is made up of cortical, thick cortical, and which is rich. This cortical is rich in something called, it is rich in a proteinous substance, called chitin. It is rich in a proteinous substance called chitin. So this particular exoskeleton that I said is rich in chitin is found in the corticals that make up the exoskeleton of arthropods. So the corticals contain proteinous substance called chitin, and this chitin has some hardened mineral salts, like the chitin has mineral salts like the phosphate and the calcium, the phosphate and the carbonates of calcium. Chitin contains minerals. Chitin contains minerals like the phosphates and calcium carbonates, or the carbonate of calcium. So we have the exoskeleton to be having the cortical, and the cortical, like we said, is rich in the the cortical is rich in proteinous substance called chitin. Like we can see here, is rich in chitin. So that is what we have in the exoskeleton. The cortical have chitin, which is a proteinous substance, and this proteinous substance contains minerals like the phosphate and calcium carbonates. So that is what we will be talking about on the exoskeleton. Now, we need to understand this, that in the exoskeleton there is something called periodic shedding of the skin, or sorry, of the skeleton. There is periodic shedding of the skeleton. And what does that what is that talking about? We are talking about molting here. Molting. What we're talking about here is molting. Molting. So what is molting? What is molting? When we talk about molting, we're actually talking about the system of elongation or growth that occurs in organisms that possess or that carry out this that possess exoskeleton. Organisms that possess exoskeleton undergo this particular process. The process is called molting. Now, how does this happen? There is what we refer to as the periodic shedding of the cortical in the arthropods. And this shedding of the exoskeleton makes it possible for them to experience growth. It makes it possible for the arthropods to experience growth, and this growth causes the new soft corticals under the skin, the new soft cortical that is embedded under the skin. It brings them out so they will get fresh air and become hardened to form the new type of exoskeleton that organism possess. So in molting, we say molting is the periodic shedding. Molting is the periodic shedding the periodic shedding of the cortical of arthropods. The continuous shedding or the periodic shedding of the cortical of the arthropods, which makes it possible for the organism to experience growth, which enhances growth. It makes it possible for the organism to experience growth. So that is what molting is. So there is a particular hormone that is responsible for this. So every time this organism undergoes molting, there is increase in the size of that organism. So every time the organism undergoes molting, there is increase in the size of the organism. So that is the very main reason why molting takes place, to bring about increase in the size of the organism. So like I said, there is a particular hormone that is responsible for this. In the process of molting or ecdysis, in molting or ecdysis, that is another name that we can call this particular process, molting or ecdysis, we have the hormone is controlled by the hormone is controlled by the molting hormone. Let me put it that way so we understand it better. It's controlled by the molting hormone called ecdysone. Ecdysone is the name of the molting hormone. The molting hormone that brings about shedding of the endoskeleton, which is the cortical. Shedding of the exoskeleton, which is the cortical in the arthropods, is brought about as a result of the formation of this hormone in the body of that organism. So when ecdysone is produced in the body of that organism, it brings about the process that we refer to as molting. So when molting occurs, it brings about the removal of the outer coating, the outer cortical, the outer shade of that organism. It removes the outer skeleton of that organism, allowing the underlying skeleton to what, receive fresh air, and that becomes hardened to become the new exoskeleton. So that is that about the exoskeleton. And the next one we'll be talking about is the endoskeleton. The endoskeleton. So what do we refer to as the endoskeleton? Like I said earlier on, the endoskeleton is found inside the body of an organism. The endoskeleton is found inside the body of an organism. It occurs inside the body of an animal. Such animals like the cartilaginous fishes, the cartilaginous skeleton of the fishes, the toads, the frogs, lizards, birds, vertebrates, including man, and it comprises of the vertebral column. The endoskeleton is found. The endoskeleton is found inside the body of an organism. It is found in organisms like the cartilaginous fishes. The cartilaginous fishes, toads, lizards or reptiles, amphibians, and the rest of those. Amphibians, mammals, let me include that, mammals, etc. So it is in these organisms that we have the endoskeleton. So like I said earlier on, the endoskeleton is actually found inside the body of an organism. And so like it is also responsible, it comprises several parts. The endoskeleton comprises of we have the vertebral column, the endoskeleton consists of the following: just a few labeled parts. We have the vertebral column, we have the vertebral column, we have the pectoral and the pelvic girdles. We have the pectoral and pelvic girdles. We have the ribs and the limbs. We have the ribs, we have the limbs. All of these are part of they make up the part of the endoskeleton that is found in the organisms that we have listed thus far. So when we talk about endoskeleton, we actually have to talk about the vertebrates. When we talk about endoskeleton, we talk about the vertebrates. So in the vertebrates, what are the two major types of endoskeleton that we have? The two major types of the endoskeleton. The endoskeleton is made up of two parts. Okay, let me put this here. The endoskeleton is made up of two components. We have the first one to be the cartilage or cartilages, and the second to be the bones. But before I go further to explain this, permit me to quickly talk about another type of skeleton that is some not the exoskeleton, and it is not part of the endoskeleton. This is what we refer to as the hydrostatic skeleton. So when we talk about endoskeleton, we talk about endoskeleton, then we talk about the hydrostatic skeleton. So what is the hydrostatic skeleton? Hydrostatic skeleton. Well, maybe one of the reasons why it is discussed in this part of the notes is because it is also found inside the body of the organism that possess them. Now, if I will explain this, if I will be explaining this to your understanding, like the name implies here, we have something called hydro here. Like you can see, we have hydro. So what we mean by the hydro here, like you can see here, we have hydro. So what we are actually talking about there is fluid, water. So the particular skeletons we are talking about in these organisms like, okay, hydroskeleton found in organisms like we have the earthworm, we have anemones, we have the echinoderms, and some mollusks and certain mollusks. Please. And some mollusks. Now, in the hydroskeleton, what actually happened? Like we have just said, hydroskeleton has fluid content. It has what? Fluidy content. That is what we see. It has fluid in it. So that particular skeleton contains fluid. So it is pressured. The fluid in it is what? Is pressured together to bring about a particular shape, to bring about or to maintain the shape and form of that organism. So the liquid, it has the liquid in the liquid or the fluid, the liquid or the fluid in these organisms is pressured, is being pressured, by some muscles on the walls of the skin of that organism, by some muscles, which in turn gives rigidity, shape and form to that animal, which gives shape and form to the animal. So the function of this particular muscle is to give or to produce or to provide a particular pressure upon the fluid that is found in that organism, and giving that pressure, enclosing that pressure on that organism, enforcing that pressure on the fluid that is found in that organism is what makes it possible for that organism to have its shape and its form. And that is what we see in the worms, in the organisms that we have listed earlier on, like the worms, the echinoderms, some mollusks, and the rest of those. So back to what we were discussing, we're actually talking about the forms of skeleton. Like we said, forms of skeleton. So the forms of skeleton we listed earlier on, we listed the cartilage and the bone. So let us quickly discuss what we refer to as the cartilage. What are cartilages? What are cartilages? So when we talk about cartilage, we need to understand that we're talking about certain substances that have the ability to give rigidity, shape, and support. They have the ability to give rigidity, shape, and support. So that is what the cartilages are. So like I said, cartilages, they are firm but flexible tissue. Cartilage is firm. Cartilage is firm but flexible. Cartilage is firm, but it is also what? Flexible tissue. Now, these two properties that we just talked about is what makes it possible for us to talk about cartilages, because it is firm and flexible. So we will understand how we refer to this particular component as cartilage. So like I said, it is firm and it is flexible, and that makes it possible for the entire skeleton of some animals like the cartilaginous fishes to be the way they are. Organisms like the cartilaginous fishes, or the dogfish, the sharks, the rays, they have this particular type of endoskeleton called the cartilages. In higher organisms, okay, let me put it this way. I said that the cartilages, they are firm but flexible, and they make up the entire part or skeleton. They make up the entire part of the skeleton of cartilaginous organisms or cartilaginous fishes. Cartilaginous fishes like sharks, rays, etc. So these are examples of the organisms that have high content or high amount of the cartilages. Now, in higher organisms or higher vertebrates, these cartilages consist of organic matrix. The cartilages found in higher organisms, in higher vertebrates, they consist of organic matrix. Cartilages in higher vertebrates consists of organic matrices. Consists of organic matrix, the chondrine. The organic matrix is called chondrine. So that is the organic matrix that is found in them. And this chondrine is embedded in a group of spherical living cells called chondroblasts. So like I said, the chondrines are found in substances called the chondroblasts. That is where we find the chondrines. The chondrines, they are found in the organism, and that gives them the ability to do what they do. So permit me to put this right. So they are found in the chondroblasts. That is where we find the chondrines. So, like I said, cartilaginous fish or cartilaginous substances found in higher vertebrates of consist of organic matrices called the chondrine, and the chondrines are found in living cells called the chondroblasts. So we need to go talk about the cartilages. So, like I said, cartilages are temporarily found in organisms. Cartilages, they are temporarily found in organisms. You don't readily see them in organisms, or you see them throughout the body of that organism, because there's a possibility of these cartilages being transformed into something else. So cartilages are temporarily present in fetus of man. In the fetus of the bones, you find the cartilages temporarily present. And as the fetus grow, as it increases, as it continues to mature, we find the cartilages being replaced by bone deposits. They are being replaced by bone deposits, by bone forming cells in the body. And this is what's referred to as ossification. What I'm saying in essence is that we have we have something called ossification. So what do we mean? What do we refer to as ossification? Ossification, simply put, is the process of transformation. Is the process of transformation or change in the cartilages to form bones. So the changes that we occur, that we see in the cartilages, turning them into bones, is what we refer to as ossification. And that is what we see in the fetus. Actually, when the fetus is being newly formed, we have it in the blood tissue, and from the blood tissue it starts to form cartilages, and cartilages then start to what? Form bones. So that is how that process goes. So we have ossification, which is called the transformation or the change of cartilages to bones. Cartilage is much softer than bone. Yes, cartilage is much softer than bone, but may be strengthened by presence of elastic fibers of collagen, and cartilages also prevent bones from being worn out. Those are part of the functions of cartilages, which we will be talking about shortly. So I quickly need us to understand, we need to talk about the types of cartilages that we have. Types of cartilages in mammals. Types of cartilages in mammals. Types of cartilages in mammals. So we'll be having three types that we'll be discussing now. We have the hyaline cartilage. Hyaline cartilage. We have the second one to be the fibrocartilage. And the third one is the elastic cartilage. So we quickly need to talk about each of these three cartilages, then understand them properly. So we are picking the hyaline first. Hyaline cartilage. So what do we mean? What do we refer to as hyaline cartilage? It is also a type of cartilage. It is a form of a cartilage that we need to understand. So what does it contain? What is the why do we refer to this as hyaline cartilage? This particular, and where can we find them? The hyaline cartilage is the simplest form or the simplest type of cartilage. Is the simplest type of cartilage. It consists of the chondrine and chondroblasts. It lacks elastic or collagen, unlike the elastic cartilage that has elastic and the fibrocartilage that has fibers. Hyaline does not have any of those two. It does not have fiber. It does not have elastics or collagen fiber. It is the simplest, lacks elastic and collagen fibers. It lacks elastic and collagen fibers, and it is found in the walls. It is found in places like the walls of the trachea. That is one of the places. The trachea of the respiratory system is one of the places where we can find the hyaline cartilage. So it is found in the trachea and also uh, bronchi forming rings supporting and keeping them open. It covers the surface of movable joints. Yes, that is another point where we can have the hyaline cartilage. It is also responsible for covering the surface of movable joints. It covers the surface of movable joints, preventing friction. So those are functions of the hyaline cartilage. It prevents the bones from rubbing on each other. It is found in movable joints as well as supporting tip of the nose. So those are functions of the hyaline cartilage. The second one is the fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage. So what is the fibrocartilage? What is the fibrocartilage? The fibro, like the name implies, it has fibers. This one is particularly more rigid than the hyaline. It is more rigid than the hyaline. It has fibers. It has fibers and it is found at joints and between successive vertebral discs. Found at joints and between successive vertebral discs. So in the vertebral column, we have a whole lot of this particular type of cartilage there. It is found between the bones of the vertebral column. It is found in the ribs, yes, joining the breastbone. Also in the ribs, articulating to join the breastbone. That is another function of the fibrocartilage. So like I said, it is responsible for preventing the bones in the joints from rubbing on each other. Also, it is found at the successive vertebral column, also for articulating the ribs from joining the breastbone. And thirdly, we have the third one called the elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage. Now, for this one, we, like the name implies also, we need to understand that this particular type of cartilage is rich in what? In elastic compounds. It has high content or high concentration of what? Elasticity. It's made up of elastic fibers, contains elastic fibers, and these elastic fibers give it its flexibility. The elastic fiber, the property of the elastic fiber is the reason why cartilages are flexible. So it gives it its flexibility. Hmm? It contains elastic fibers which enhances flexibility. It enhances flexibility. That is the major function of the elastic cartilage. It is present in the epiglottis, found in the epiglottis. It is found in the epiglottis, the pinna. It's found in the epiglottis, the pinna, and some other parts of the body. So those are the three types of cartilages that we have. I've talked about the first one to be the hyaline cartilage, and I said it is the simplest that lacks elastic or collagen fibers. It is found in the walls of the trachea and then covers surface of movable joints, preventing friction. And then we have the second one, which is fibrocartilage. Fibrocartilage. The fibrocartilage is more rigid than the hyaline cartilage, and we talked about the positions where we can find them, like in the successive vertebral discs, and also between the ribs and the breast bone. It articulates the ribs and the breastbone. And lastly, we talked about the elastic cartilage. The elastic cartilage, which has what? High amount of elastic properties. It has, or it contains elastic fibers, which gives the cartilages its flexibility. It enhances the flexibility of the cartilages, and that is why they are found in the epiglottis, in the pinna, that is the outer ear, or the outer part of the ear, and other parts of the body, like the external auditory meatus. So thus far we have explained the cartilages. Now we want to go and explain the B part of the cartilages. Remember, we said that the endoskeleton is made up of, we have the two forms of the endoskeleton. We said one is cartilage and the other is the bone. So we have just explained the cartilage. Let us now go to talk about the bones. So we want to talk about the bones now. So here we're now going to be talking about bones. Excuse me. We'll be talking about bones. So what are bones? Bones. That is what we want to talk about now. So bones are the rigid framework, the rigid substances that are found in the supporting tissue. The bone is the hardest tissue which the skeleton of the vertebrate is made up of. These are rigid substances. These are rigid or hard substances that make up the supporting tissue. In animals, or particularly the vertebrates. So the bones, they are the hardest tissues that make up the skeleton of vertebrates. And they are composed of calcium salts. Like what we talked about the cartilages. So the cartilages, they also have, well, we'll get there, we'll get to explain that shortly too. They also have their own substances that they are made up of, but not necessarily mineral salts. Not necessarily mineral salts. But the bones contain calcium salts. They contain calcium salts. They contain calcium salts like the calcium phosphate, and organic materials. And then it gives them the rigidity and the strength that they require. Embedded in these cells are substances called the osteoblasts and the osteocytes. In the bones, are substances called the osteoblasts and osteocytes. These particular substances are responsible for the ability that the bone has, the ability to grow, to regenerate, and the rest of those. So bones grow, they change their shape, they repair themselves when they are fractured. Yes, bones change, they grow and repair themselves when they actually was broken or fractured. The presence of the calcium and phosphorus in our diet is essential for formation of healthy bones. Yes, one of the reasons why we need to have high supplement of calcium and phosphate materials in our food is to enhance the strength of our bones. That is the function of calcium and phosphorus in our diet, to make the formation of the bones uh, very, very strengthened, to enhance the formation of our bones and our teeth, since these are the major constituents of the bone. Because the bones are richly embedded with substances like calcium and phosphorus. So that is why we have been advised several times or severally to feed on substances that are rich in these materials, calcium and phosphorus, so they can enhance formation of healthy bones and teeth. So the calcium and phosphorus are needed in the diet, needed in our diet to enhance the formation of healthy bones, and teeth. So these are the functions of the calcium and phosphorus. So quickly we'll be talking about the differences between bones and cartilages. Let us quickly look at the differences that we can find between bones and cartilages. Differences between bones, or let me say cartilages, since we discussed that earlier. Cartilages and bones. Differences between cartilages and bones, that is what we quickly want to look at now. So let's do this. Let's make it into a table. Let's make a table. Cartilages, and then we have bones on this other side. Bones, cartilages and bones, cartilages and bones. So let's see what we have. The first difference between the cartilage and bone. Cartilages are made of living cells. Cartilages are made of living cells. These living cells are called chondroblasts. Unlike in the bones, the bones have they also have living cells called the osteocytes. Also, they have or they are surrounded by non-living cells. And that is collagen. Yes, the cartilages, they have living cells called the chondroblasts, while the bones have the osteocytes as their living cells, and then they are surrounded by non-living cells called collagen. So that is the first major difference between them. The second one is that the cartilages do not have mineral salts. They lack mineral salts. They lack mineral salts, unlike the bones that have mineral salts. They contain mineral salts. The bones contain mineral salts, e.g., we have the calcium phosphates. We have the calcium phosphates in the bones. And then the third difference is that the cartilages are made of soft substances. Made of soft substances. While this one has what? Made of hard substances. We have other ones. We have tough and flexible. Yes, cartilages are tough and flexible. Cartilages are tough, and that is why you can pull them, you can stretch them. They rarely tear, they don't tear easily. So they are tough and they are flexible. Yes, they can bend, they can twist, unlike the bones that are very, very strong and rigid, particularly in adults. Strong and rigid in adults. They are strong and rigid in adults. We have okay, let me put this other two on the next page. Here we have cartilages. And here we have bones. So let's continue with our table to try to differentiate them. Sorry about that. So we have the cartilages and the bones. So number 5 now. We have the fifth point to be that the cartilages can be replaced by bones. The cartilages can be replaced by bones, but the bones cannot be replaced. They cannot be replaced by cartilages. Cartilages can be replaced by bones, but bones cannot be replaced by cartilages. And lastly, we have this saying that the cartilages do not have blood vessels. They lack blood vessels. But bones have blood vessels. They have blood vessels, they have food and oxygen. Bones have blood vessels, food, as well as oxygen. So these are the major differences that we have between the cartilages and the bones. So quickly, we look at the functions of the mammalian skeleton. Functions of the mammalian skeleton. The functions of the mammalian skeleton. That is what we want to look at now. So number one, the first function there is support. Support, yes. The mammalian skeleton gives support to the body of the organism. It provides support to internal organs that are attached to it. Internal organs like the heart, the lungs, the liver, preventing them from having to have a contact with one another, preventing them from crushing one another. So it is responsible for the support that it gives. It is on the walls of the chest region, the walls of the thoracic region of the body, that we have the liver, the lungs rather, being attached to. And the lungs does not fall on the heart, which is towards the back of the chest region as well. The lungs doesn't lie on the heart. It doesn't cause the heart any harm, because they are both attached to their specific positions, with giving support to being supported by the part of the organism, or the skeletal system of the organism. Number two is protection. Now, we need to understand here that the skeleton of an organism protects internal structure. It protects internal structure from being damaged. The skeleton protects some vital organs of the body. Example, the skull. The skull is part of the skeleton. It's called the cranium, or the cranial box, as the case might be. The vertebral column. The skull protects the brain from being crushed. The vertebral column protects also the spinal cord from being crushed. So they serve the function of protecting some internal organs. And number three, we have locomotion. The reason why organism can move from place to place is because of the skeleton that it possesses. If organisms do not have skeleton, it will not be easy for that organism to actually move from one place to another. So those are some of the functions of the mammalian skeleton. Number four is the production of red blood cell. Production of red blood cell. Yes, the red blood cell is produced in special cells of the body. Like I said, the RBC, or the red blood cells, they are produced in special cells of the body, the long bone of the body called the femur. So that is where we have the production of red blood cell. And then we have the respiratory movement. That is another function. Another function is respiratory movement. The reason why our heart has the ability to move, or to pump blood or air or whatever that it is carrying across to other parts of the body, it is as a result of the function of the skeletal system. If the skeleton wasn't beaten in and out, the lungs will not be able to absorb air and expel air. And if that doesn't happen, then it is more or less that the person is not existing. So respiratory movement is brought about by the continuous contraction and relaxation of the thoracic region of the chest cavity in organisms. So when there is this respiratory movement, when there is this thoracic the contraction and relaxation of the thoracic movement, that is what the thoracic region rather, that is what makes it possible for respiration to take place. Whenever there is a contraction of the chest region, or the uh, what do you call it, the rib cage. When there is a contraction of the rib cage, that is when the organism is what, expelling air. When it expels air, there will be contraction of the rib cage, and when it is absorbing air, there will be what, relaxation of the rib cage. When it is absorbing air, there will be relaxation of the rib cage, permitting air to go into the lungs. So those are some of the functions. And lastly, here the last one I will talk about is bone cells. Bone cells. Bone cells are released by a hormone called osteocalcin. Bone cells produced or released by a hormone called osteocalcin, and the function of this osteocalcin is to regulate blood glucose and fat deposits that we have in the body. Lastly, I said that the last one here is bone cells, formation of bone cells. So these bone cells are responsible for producing or releasing the hormone called osteocalcin. And osteocalcin, what osteocalcin does is to regulate blood glucose and fat deposits. So that is how far we'll be coming today. If we have to do a quick recap of all that we have talked about, we have the first thing there talking about tissues and supporting systems. We're bringing ourselves to understand what tissues and supporting systems are. And now we said tissues are a collection of cells with similar structure and function. Then we talked about the systems that are possible to have their shapes. We said that these systems are possible to have their shape and size because of tissues that possess them. Now we talked about skeleton, and we made mention of the types of skeleton that we have. We said skeleton is a framework that gives shape, support, and protection to the parts of the body of an organism. And then at the types, we have the endoskeleton and the exoskeleton. The exoskeleton is found outside the body of the organism, while the endoskeleton is found inside the body of the organism. We also talked about molting, which is the shedding of cortical in the arthropods. And also we went further to talk about hydrostatic skeleton. Hydrostatic skeleton is the skeleton that is found in some worms. That is as a result of the fluid in them being pressured upon by the muscle. And then we've talked about the forms of skeleton. We listed the two forms of skeleton. We talked about cartilages and what, bones. Cartilages have three types. We have the hyaline cartilage, the fibrocartilage, and the elastic cartilage. And then we said that the formation of bones from cartilages is what we refer to as ossification. Ossification is the process of transformation of bones, of cartilages to bones. The process of transformation of cartilages to form bones is what we refer to as ossification. And then we went further to also talk about the bones. We talked about the constituent materials in the bones, and then the differences between the cartilages and the bones. After we finished talking about the cartilages and the bone, that was when we talked about the functions of the mammalian skeleton. So we're going to be calling it a day here. In one of the subsequent classes that we'll be having next, or teachings that we'll be having next, we'll be talking about skeleton in animals, and then subsequently we'll talk about the skeleton in, or sorry, supporting tissues in plants. So thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our page, share it. Thank you very much.